Little Blog on the Prairie, a First Chapter Friday read aloud and author interview with Amanda Zeba the Word Nerd and Cathleen Davitt Bell. Hi, my name is Amanda Zeba. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd, and another First Chapter Friday video. This week I'm going to be reading to you from Little Blog on the Prairie. Even better than that, after I'm done, we're going to have a chance to chat with author Cathleen Davitt Bell, hear her 5 answers to the questions I ask, and learn all about her writing process and more. But before we do that, let's dig in. Little House on the Prairie, great book. Horrible vacation idea. Genevieve Welsh has a nice, normal, regular summer planned. That is, until her mom signs up the family for Camp Frontier, a themed vacation that promises its guests the thrill of living like 1890s pioneers. Even though they're forced to surrender all of their modern possessions, Jen manages to secretly keep in touch with her friends back home, regaling them with all the horrible day-to-day details of life on this little hell on the prairie. In truth, frontier living isn't all that bad. There's a cute guy named Caleb who lives in the next clearing, and who knew Jen would prove to be so good at churning butter? Besides, by the time Jen's friend turned her stories into the most popular blog on the internet, Jen's got more important things to worry about, like finding a way to keep her family from failing the frontier competition, and trying to keep the resident Nellie Olson from stealing Caleb. I absolutely loved this book. It's super funny, it's perfect for summer, and I hope you love it as well. Little Blog on the Prairie by Cathleen Davitt Bell, Chapter 1. At first, it felt like a normal family vacation. There was the late night packing, the airport breakfast, the fighting with my little brother over the window seat, the chewing of 3 pieces of gum as the plane took off so my ears wouldn't pop. But there was nothing normal about the camp director, Ron, who met us at the baggage claim area in Laramie, Wyoming. Tall and gaunt, he was wearing a black felt hat, a roughly woven shirt, and boots he could have borrowed from his cousin Frankenstein. Back in 6th grade, I had to do a report on the Amish, and Ron looked like one of them. Except the Amish usually drive buggies and make pretzels, and Ron was holding a sign that said, "The Welsh family." That's us, as if he were some kind of celebrity limo driver gone wrong. 2 hours and 1 bumpy ride down an endless dirt road later, we met Ron's wife, Betsy. As we were tumbling out of the van, she was standing on the porch of their house, and we could see right away that she was no Frankenstein. Instead, she looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy, or woman, whatever. There were blonde curls poking out from beneath her bonnet, her cheeks were red like they'd been scrubbed, and in her long, bright brown dress and flowery apron, she could have been one of those women who work at the historic places you go on field trips. You know, where they show you all about spinning wool or baking bread. But you can see that underneath their dresses, they're really wearing sneakers and sweatpants. "Welcome," Betsy called down from the porch, "to the year 1890. And that's when it hit me. Those women who work at the historic field trip places, Betsy wasn't one of them. These weren't costumes she and Ron were wearing. Their clothes were for real. And in about 5 minutes, all of this would be real for me too. My mom and I had the biggest fight of my life when she told me we'd been going to Frontier Family History Camp. This place in the middle of nowhere where you live with your family in a 1-room cabin and you work all the time doing housework and farm stuff, and girls have to wear dresses and there's nothing for kids to do, and anything you'd want to bring is not allowed. No iPods, no phones, no computers, no sports, no friends, no games. We'd be pretending to live in the time before even Monopoly was invented. Not that I even liked that game. At the end of the argument, which I guess it's pretty obvious I lost, I stood at the top of the stairs, looked down at my mom over the banister, and shouted, "It's not fair! You can't make me go!" My mom shouted right back, "Genevieve, you will thank me later." Have you ever noticed that when people say you will thank me later, you never do? In the van, Ron had explained that we were the last of the 4 families to arrive. The others had come in the day before. We'd get our camp clothes and then meet everyone at a picnic before going to our cabin. "Come," Ron said to my brother Gavin and my dad. "I'll show you the barn while the ladies here get all feminized." My dad turned off his BlackBerry for the first time all day. I don't think he had any idea what we were getting into. I doubt he'd even read the camp brochure. You see, my dad generally likes it that my mom makes all the dinners and most of the decisions, and he can go to work, come home, and then just roll around on the floor with Gavin or come stand on the sidelines at my soccer games. He always says, "Ask your mother," when we're bugging him to bend some of her rules, like whole wheat bagels instead of regular, soup before candy on Halloween. No cell phones until college. But I know, I can just tell that if my dad were our only parent, life would be much less complicated. For example, I'm pretty sure that if my dad had planned this vacation, we'd be at Club Med, where we went last year and had hands down the best time ever, because when you get bored, the counselors will take you windsurfing and you can eat anything you want. As my dad and Gavin trotted off with Ron, my mom almost broke into a run going over to meet Betsy on the porch. The fringes on Mom's suede cowgirl jacket brushed against her jeans, and her long hair swung in the same happy beat. This vacation, Frontier History Family Camp, is my mom's dream. Or one of them. She has lots of dreams. To be a marathon runner, to build her own furniture, to visit the Galapagos Islands, to have children who perform in school plays. Ugh. She was a Little House on the Prairie addict as a kid, and you could tell from the way she was walking, the way she was holding out her hand, the way she was smiling, that she couldn't wait for our family's very own Little House adventure to begin. When my mom finished shaking hands with Betsy, Betsy turned to me. "You must be Genevieve," she said, and my mom gave a little gush of appreciation that Betsy had learned my name in advance. "You're about the same age as my daughter, Nora. I'm sure you two will get acquainted as soon as she's back from the milking," Betsy said. "The milking?" I repeated, on the outside chance that if Betsy heard how absurd she sounded, she'd take it back. My best friends Kristen and Ashley, they would be choking with laughter right about now. But Kristen and Ashley weren't here. They were in school for 3 or more weeks of 8th grade, and then they'd start the routine of mornings at soccer camp and afternoons at the rec center pool that has defined our last few summers. I should be with them. Betsy held open the door and motioned for us to enter the house. "We'll get you dressed," she said. "And then you'll get to meet everybody at the picnic." Her smile was contagious, like a yawn. My mom smiled back, and even I caught myself mimicking Betsy's grin. I could tell because my jaw hurt. But after we entered the house, I felt my smile fade. For a second, I could only stand there and stare, forgetting that I was being rude. I always thought of our house as ordinary. Gavin and I each have a bedroom. There's a room called the living room that no one goes in. There's a family room where we spend most of our time, and there's also a basement where we watch TV. In all of these rooms, there are regular-sized windows that let in light, which is the whole point of windows, right? But Betsy's house, it was tiny. Downstairs, it basically consisted of one room, the kitchen. And the windows were so few and so small it was dark inside, though it was the middle of the day. At least it was warm, I thought, and then I noticed how great it smelled. Like a bakery. It smelled even better than the Cinnabon at the mall. We hadn't eaten anything since our Au Bon Pain muffins on the plane, and now it was well past lunch. I was starving. "What you're cooking smells awesome," I hinted. My mom turned to me and smiled, her "isn't this fun" smile. I think she was excited that I had made a positive comment, so I quickly flashed my "don't kid yourself" frown. "I'm baking pies for the picnic," Betsy explained. "Strawberry rhubarb and dried apple." She took a big whiff. "It does smell wonderful, doesn't it?" Again, big smile. "Oh, Genevieve, I just know you're about to have the experience of a lifetime," she said. "Don't you feel it? You should thank your mom, right now." "Yeah, right," I mumbled. I slung my knapsack over my shoulder and followed Betsy up the stairs. What I wanted to tell her was that instead of feeling grateful, I felt a little bit sick. That during the bumpy van ride, I'd been trying really, really hard not to cry. I had cried the night before when I was packing. After putting all of my summer stuff away, the tank tops and the t-shirts there was no point in bringing. The ribbons Ashley and I had been talking about braiding into our hair, my Eugenia V. Krebs middle school soccer sweatshirt, signed an indelible marker by every single girl at the team at the end of the season pizza party. I burst into the kitchen in tears and told my mom that as much as I'd hated the idea of Camp Frontier from the outset, I'd only now just felt the full depths of the horror. I told her that I flat out wasn't going to go, that I would live with Grandma in Florida and eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and go to the Science Museum every day if I had to. It was then that my mom let me open a present she'd planned to save until we returned. And once I opened it, I was like, wow. Because inside the organically composted Native American wrapping paper, my mom was totally into all that stuff, was my very own cell phone. Something that she had forbidden since I started asking for one around age 10. I started to gush, but before I could even open the box, she took it out of my hands. She laid it on the kitchen counter and said, "If you cooperate, this," she paused as if to swallow her personal distaste for technology, "this thing will be waiting for you when we get back. It's linked up to our service plan. It's ready and waiting to go. But if you don't cooperate, I'm selling it on eBay. eBay. You mean eBay? But she wasn't listening. Because as usual, my mom would get what she wanted. She was right. I wanted that phone more than I wanted to cancel our plans. Ashley and Kristen were always calling and texting each other, and I wanted to be able to do that too. I wanted it in the way I wanted a bike when I was 5, or to be friends with Ashley when we were 8 and her family had just moved to town. But did I want it this badly? As I trudged up the stairs after Betsy, I wasn't so sure. If you want to find out what happens to Genevieve and her family at Camp Frontier, absolutely pick up a copy of this book. But right now, let's go ahead and talk to the author, Cathleen Davitt Bell. Hello, readers. We are here today with author Cathleen Davitt Bell. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I absolutely loved your book, Little Blog on the Prairie, and I'm really excited to ask you 5 questions about the book and about you as a writer. So I'm just going to dive right in if that's all right.
That's perfect.
Okay, so my first question is about your childhood. If you ever went to summer camp, if you were a history buff, if you watched Little House on the Prairie on TBS like I did as a kid, how much of your childhood found its way into this story?
Well, this story was completely based on my childhood fantasy of returning to the frontier and like moving on to the set of Little House on the Prairie. So that was my complete fantasy as a child. I remember being in the backseat on a long car trip and sketching out a whole plan for a village where families could go, and the parents would slip into the parent roles, or the kids would get to play in this amazing, like old-fashioned landscape where you would get to kind of return and really check out the sights and sounds and feel of history. I think that was particularly relevant to my childhood and to like a lot of the cultural moment around Little House on the Prairie. It was like sort of, maybe people were looking for like to get away from some of the complexity of the 1970s and early 80s. And I was definitely craving that myself as a young child. As I grew up, I came to see that, like, I remember thinking what it would be like when I was a young parent to have like to have that be my landscape. And I actually cracked myself up walking down the street thinking about like how incredibly hard it would be as a parent to like step into this frontier world where you had to have all these skills that most people don't have. And that's where the genesis of the idea came from. It was a little bit of like a reality TV landscape sorry, that was my let me shut this thing. Like a reality TV landscape, meets, like I had seen Frontier House and Manor House, which I highly recommend if you're into sort of historical fantasy worlds, like of for like, what it actually feels like to live on the frontier. There was a lot of wood chopping. That was from Frontier House. Yeah. That's what I got from that.
Confession, I can totally remember once I was also a big fan of Little House on the Prairie TV show, and like putting a bowl of water in my room and like washing my face that way. Like that's how Laura would do it. So I can totally.
Yes, but did you ever do it when the water was frozen into ice and you had to crack the surface?
No, even though I live in Wisconsin, my home was heated, so I did not have to do that. Thankfully.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you kind of like touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious about your writing process. How do you go from that idea, walking down the street, cracking yourself up, to words on the page to, full story?
For me, the writing this book it started as a kind of reality show story. So the idea for it was that this character would have been like, her family would be cast in a reality show. And pretty soon it became clear that like really the reality show was a lot of weight on the story that wasn't needed. Like that this story came alive in just the living, breathing moments of them trying to survive on the fake frontier. And and that the blog was enough of a kind of modern day element without having to get into like all the politics and all of the, and having like the camera crews and having, you know, the producers. And I didn't really know very much about reality television except what I'd seen, you know, the outside of it looking in,
Yeah.
not the inside of it. So it was definitely like an evolution to drop that idea, but a lot of the scenes remained. And this story writing, I kind of told the story in order. Like, you know, it started with the beginning and I had no idea what the end would be. And there are other stories that I've written where I know the end and the whole story is writing toward the end. And I kind of almost prefer that because I feel like those have a lot more forward momentum. But this story, I was able to use for this story a lot of kind of rational thinking about how to structure a story because the camp was so structured. So there was opening day, there was showing up at camp, there was like the rules of camp, how does this work? And then there were touch points throughout the summer, like, well, the corn was growing and the, you know, people were getting better at things. And there was sort of more progression through the camp. So I was able to use that as a frame, which was very helpful in sort of structuring the feeling that you're actually progressing through this summer.
Yeah, I love that. I love so much about that. One, that like you had an idea and it didn't really work out the way you wanted. So, you know, you weren't afraid to shift it. I think that a lot of times, especially beginning writers, feel like they have to stick with it. And so bravo for being flexible and trying something different. That's really good. Oh, I had another thought, but I lost it. So I'm just going to move on. In this story, Genevieve uses words to help her cope with a kind of unpleasant situation. She writes the blog post, well, she writes to her friends. Have you ever done that? Have you ever used words to help you cope with an unpleasant situation? Or do you have any advice for kids who maybe find themselves in a hard spot and how they could use words to help them?
Using words, well, when you say that, I think of the advice that you give very young children, which is use your words, you know, like instead of hitting or grabbing or storming out of a room. But I think you mean sort of like using your wit and your, you know, sort of storytelling as a way of comforting yourself or a way of framing. And I think most people who write probably do that without thinking about it. Like, you know, when you're walking down the street and you're telling yourself a little story and then suddenly you find yourself laughing out loud, that's kind of using words to frame a sort of, you're both walking down the street and you're using words in your mind to kind of create an alternate reality for yourself, to keep yourself amused. I am definitely like someone who almost to my detriment will tell a joke, you know, we'll say something funny or we'll point out an incongruity or a little, you know, like just a quick turn of phrase that usually people laugh. I hope it's not just politeness, but sometimes I have to remind myself to be a little bit more serious. But the telling jokes is definitely a big part of my family. So in my husband's family, people tell stories, you know, with beginnings, middle, and ends, and those are great. But in my family, people tend to riff on a joke, like something will happen and then they'll say like a funny version of that, and then someone else will say an extra funny version of that. So like telling a joke, getting a laugh, and using words to make that happen is where I come from.
Yeah. So great. I love that. I love like the telling yourself a story. And just because it doesn't necessarily get written down doesn't mean that it's not using words, which is so great.
Yeah, for sure.
When I was reading your bio and I was learning a little bit more about you, it seems like books have always been a part of your life. And so I'm curious, what would you say to someone who says that they don't like books and they don't like reading?
Well, that's an interesting thing that you bring up because neither of my children has become a huge avid reader. Like maybe it's books were pushed a little too hard. We definitely read aloud a ton when they were little, and I feel like there's kids who are musicians, there's kids who are readers, there are kids who love sports, and it's kind of like you get drawn to the thing that you're drawn to. Like I don't think, you know, you could have kept me away from books. I don't think, you can keep some kids away from sports. Like there's kids who are forced to play musical instruments, and there's kids who kind of find a musical instrument, start teaching themselves to play it, like get help from some like kind musician friend who takes pity on them and teaches them some things. Like, it's you, I would say, rather than what do you love? Like find that one thing and go for that. Like, don't try to force yourself. But I will also say that I think that if a book doesn't feel like your choice, you might not have a chance to love it. And if you don't love reading books right now, try reading graphic novels, because I remember losing myself in graphic novels. Embarrassingly enough, or not embarrassing, my graphic novel, we didn't have a lot of the excellent graphic novels that are available now. So for me, I lost myself. I think I had the picture Bible. I read the Bible like 5 times in comic book form as a child, and it's come in handy. But I think start slow, start fun, follow your pleasure. And if reading isn't doing it for you, like, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So wise. So wise. My own kids are graphic novel hoarders. They love those as well.
Yeah.
So I know that you've written several books, and I know that you're a mom, and I know that you do a whole bunch of other things. And so sometimes there isn't time for writing, or we kind of ebb and flow out of creative cycles. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And if someone finds themselves like outside of a creative flow, maybe offer a little advice or tell them not to worry?
Yeah. And thanks for asking that question in that way. My evolution as a writer is that I knew it was something I always wanted to do. I started doing it in my 20s. I went to grad school for writing, and I worked, as hard as I could in my 20s and early 30s, just writing novel after novel. And I kind of had a breakthrough with my first novel, for kids, and I had sold it, and I sold Little Blog, and I did a third novel. I wrote a trilogy. It's a kind of collaboration with a publishing company I knew, and I wrote another book as part of a series that was a collaboration, and I had just so much fun doing it. But I got to a point where I needed to, as a parent, I needed to earn more money, and I needed to, and I think if I had been like filled with stories that needed to be told, I would have kept doing it. But I think it was a combination of needing to feel like I was supporting my family, and also needing to feeling like the need to support my family was like stressing me out so much that the stories were getting crushed. And I just wasn't finding it. And I wasn't finding as much pleasure in it, as much joy. And I was really enjoying my freelance work life. And so when I got the opportunity to take a full-time job, I just went with it. And I am so busy that I cannot find time to write right now. But I have kept it up with my writing group, and I'm finding that reading other people's writing brings me so much joy. Sorry. I actually feel like sometimes the ability to read someone else's novel and help them find structure uses those muscles while also feeling like I'm doing good in the world and doing a friend a giant favor, and getting back into the part of my brain that teased that stuff out. I feel like this is gonna sound so unromantic, but the skills of writing out a novel, of pacing the novel, of editing the novel, are like amazing in the business context. Like I can write a PowerPoint like you wouldn't believe, like structuring a story. And then I have also really enjoyed returning to reading, like because I to take to have a low, like I don't have to read anything at all. And so now I'm reading just for fun, and it is so great. And I'm remembering what it means to just be a reader. Like when you're a writer, you're often encountering a lot of other writers, and everyone's reading, but in the back of their head, they're thinking like, what about my book? What about my writing? What about my story? And that's great. Like I was there for a long time, but to be just a reader thinking like, to be that audience that I wanted, that I was so grateful to have, all those readers who wrote me like sweet notes and, called me and invited me to speak at their schools, and that all, like, being sort of stepping into the audience world has made me very happy, and to provide that audience role for other writers. And that said, I'm always looking for a great early new writer, someone I haven't read before, someone who not a lot of people are reading, because I think, it's just like some of the best books just don't rise to the top of the bestseller list or even the like bookstore table. And those are the people who need our support.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things about this channel and doing these interviews and sharing these First Chapter Friday books is like some are award winning and some are like, very literary and renowned, and others are just ones that I stinking love and just want to shout out about. And so I love that. I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah. And that finding the book is like what libraries are good at, right? Like when I was a kid, I'm sure it sounds like you were just as much of a reader. It was like you go to the library, you just read whatever they had. Like, you would pick it up, you'd say, why not? And you would try it. And I feel like I read so many books that had profound influence on me that I can't even remember. I can remember very vividly what they were about, but I can't remember who wrote them or even the name of the book. And that sort of just constantly running river that you dip a toe into and dip a toe out of is where books really shine in terms of shaping people and being a resource. So kudos to libraries. And I wish I was spending more time at my local library. It's just reopened actually from the pandemic. So I'm going to have to jump back in there.
Yeah, make a little note to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. If a reader has a question that we haven't answered here today, where is the best place for them to get a hold of you?
Well, they can visit my website or send me an email, and they're very similar. CathleenDavittBell.com is the website, and CathleenDavittBell@gmail is the email address.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put your website in the link in the description box below. Thank you so much for your time and for your great books. We love them.
Thank you so much. Thanks for doing this. I love this program.
You're welcome. All right. Happy reading, everybody.
Bye.
To continue reading Little Blog on the Prairie, pick up a copy from your school library, purchase one from your local indie bookstore, or grab it via the link in the description box. Then be sure to check out the rest of the First Chapter Friday videos and all the other great stuff I have for you on my channel. Thanks for stopping by. I hope to see you again, and happy reading!